Thank you for being here in person today. A couple of weeks ago, we had Energy Secretary Granholm testify in front of the House Energy and Commerce Committee, and I asked her if she was anti-fossil fuels. And she replied, quote, "I would like transition away from unabated fossil fuels to a clean energy future." Administrator Regan, I want to pose the same question to you. Are you anti-fossil fuels, and do you agree with Secretary Granholm's policy objective to transition from fossil fuels?
What I would say is we're focused on controlling the emissions. I think that question is interesting because when we think about the president's directive for us to focus on carbon capture and storage, we're focused on a technology that would capture the carbon emissions from fuel sources like natural gas. And so when we think about the future, in my opinion, and when you look at the regulations that EPA is focused on, we're focused on controlling the carbon emissions that we see in our economy. And we know that it's going to be a combination of things: energy efficiency, wind, solar, battery storage. We're going to have advanced natural gas infrastructure in place. We're going to have carbon capture and storage. We know that we're going to have a suite of options if we're going to win the 21st century.
I agree with you on carbon capture. I actually like the aspect of that. Let me ask you a question. I asked her, how'd you get up here today?
I'm sorry?
How did you get to the Hill today?
Government vehicle.
That was Suburban?
Yes.
So you got a chase detail. They have second Suburban as well?
I'm sorry?
Did you have two Suburbans? You had a security detail as well?
Just one.
Just one? Okay.
Yes.
And that's electric vehicle, I assume?
I'm riding in the vehicle that our current contract allows, and when our contract is up, I'll take a look at my options.
Well, you should. If you're going to talk about emissions and everything that you mentioned earlier, I think you should. Let me shift gears because we talked about natural gas just a second ago. Political reality is it's impossible to build a natural gas pipeline in the United States right now. Did you know that?
Well, what I would say is that in the role of EPA, as we think about the power sector in the future, we're actually having conversations about if we were to have new natural gas turbines, what would that look like, and how can we best position that in the future, if natural gas isn't the option, but let's say the option is hydrogen.
Natural gas pipeline turbines, you have to have natural gas availability, and that requires a pipeline. But yet the EPA aids and abets the environmentalist groups that take them to court and litigate these projects to the point where they can't be sustained or completed. Example, I'm worried about South Carolina's ability to meet our energy demands in the future because the ACP, the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, was stopped basically on the litigation side of it.
I think if we're going to cite that one, I was state secretary in North Carolina, and I can say that, for the record, under the Cooper administration and under my watch, we approved the Atlantic Coast Pipeline permits that were under my jurisdiction. Different outcome for the Mountain Valley Pipeline. And what I did was I focused on the science and focused on the law. So since you raised Atlantic Coast Pipeline,
I appreciate you mentioning your approval of the ACP, but ultimately the ACP got canceled by Duke Energy because of litigation cost. Litigation costs came from the environmental groups who we defeated at the Supreme Court on the Appalachian Trail aspect, but they were continued to litigate it. And this isn't an isolated example. The ACP is just one I used because I was actively involved in the Appalachian Trail amicus brief that we actually won in the Supreme Court. But the fact is the environmental groups continue to litigate these pipelines. And the ACP is just one. And so we're going to see a continued thwarting by EPA and others on natural gas pipelines.
I don't want to conflate. I worked for the state of North Carolina. I worked for the EPA, not environmental groups. I hear your arguments. Your arguments sound like they're levied towards the environmental groups. And so I want to be responsive in the capacity that I'm in, which is not an environmental group. I am trying to be responsible and engage with our industry, provide certainty, and focus on technological solutions that win the future. I don't work for an environmental group.
So for the energy regulations that fall under the EPA's jurisdiction, Clean Air Act mainly, Clean Water Act, can you commit to instilling certainty for these groups that want to build, these companies that want to build pipelines to provide natural gas and other resources for for energy production?
You know, I was just criticized earlier for saying this, but actually what I'm doing to respond to the power sector and EEI, I'm actually spending time with these CEOs, and they've asked for certainty. And so what we've done is we've taken a look at all the rules that we're statutorily required to put out, and we're putting them in a package. We're not darkening their doorstep one at a time, death by 1,000 paper cuts. We're trying to present a uniform package so that our power sector understands what investments might work for the future. What I can commit to is doing what I've been doing, which is working very transparently with the oil and gas sector and with the power sector on the rules that are coming forward and how we can really take advantage of technology and innovation so that we can drive down the emissions that we're seeing, not only that contribute to climate pollutants, but also to health-based pollutants.
And certainly as well as the existing rules and regulations that are in place today.
We need certainty for our companies to be able to make the long-term investments that we need.
I like what you said. I appreciate you saying that. I'm going to look forward to questioning you again in a year and find out if that certainty has been applied. Mr. Chairman, thank you so much.
Gentlemen.